Before we get started, if you missed any of our episodes, you can always head over to kfoxtv.com/community/the-breakdown. Now let's break it down. Hi guys, I'm Brad Montgomery and welcome to The Breakdown. And here we talk about psychology, science, as well as investing. Today we're going to be on the science side, and instead of talking about fauna that is native to the borderland, we're going to be talking about wildlife that is non-native to the borderland. And I'm back with Lois Balin with Texas Parks and Wildlife. And Lois, we're going to get right into it here. We know last time we had a great conversation about, the bear story in El Paso. I mean, just a lot of cool stuff came up, all the way down to some of the birds, which we may revisit some of those in just a bit. But roughly, we were talking native to the area, which is super fascinating and interesting in its own right. But there's also some non-native species. And roughly, if you had to do an estimate, including birds, how many non-native and or invasive, but not, I guess non-native included, are there here in the borderland?
Well, if you include plants.
Oh, I didn't think. Yeah, include plants too.
Yeah, if you include plants, it's over 100.
Wow. Okay.
It's over 100.
Okay.
And at least 50 animal species.
Okay.
But there's a big difference between non-native and invasive.
Right.
So because invasive, you can have a native animal that's invasive or a native plant that's invasive, or it could be a non-native exotic plant.
And that's
invasive.
And that's what we're used to thinking is like non-native exotic.
Yeah.
But I guess native becoming invasive, it was like a population issue. The population kind of gets out of control.
Right. They're just, some plants and animals that they just get out of control quickly. They just reproduce very, very quickly.
So, okay, now we're going to do some of the animals, and then we're going to get down to some of the birds and then some of the plants. So what are, some of the most likely of the non-native animals that people are likely to see? I think I saw a video of some of the wild boar that we had talked about last time. Is that one of the more likely?
Well, are we talking about West Texas or Texas?
Not Texas.
Because it's real different.
Just around, I would say, borderland, Las Cruces, El Paso, Franklin Mountains.
Right.
Waco Tanks.
Well, fortunately, we do not have feral hogs here yet or Russian boar. They're a huge problem in the rest of the state.
Oh.
But they haven't made it out here yet, and we're hoping that they never do.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, they have a hunting season for them or something like that in the rest of the state, or you can hunt them year round, or?
I think so. They're really trying to,
get the
control them. So I think you can hunt pretty much what you want.
And as far as the here in the borderland, what could we maybe run into like in the Franklins that is not native, or that we might see even around White Sands or?
Right. Well, I think the ones of concern are the oryx that were introduced to the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico as a hunting species, a large game species, and the aoudad, which is also known as Barbary sheep. And these are, from Africa, and they're very, very invasive, and they reproduce very quickly, and they destroy habitat and compete with native bighorn sheep.
So the sheep species, are they more in the mountainous terrain? Do they come down to the flats?
They'll come down too.
Really? Okay.
The aoudad will.
Aoudad will. Okay.
Bighorn definitely like to stay up high in rocky, really steep areas.
So they feel safe.
Yeah.
And then the oryx. I was surprised. I mean, I've seen pictures of them through like Tularosa Basin. Look beautiful. It does look strange.
They are a gorgeous animal.
They are. Striking color.
Yes, in the antelope family. And they're huge, bigger than horses.
I didn't realize
and
that.
They're coming. They're moving across, Mexico in the desert. And we had one. I got a call about one on the Butterfield golf course.
Oh, interesting.
And there's a couple that have been living at the Fred Hervey wastewater treatment plant. And I went there to see them, and sure enough, they were laying down, fortunately. But that's an animal that could be very dangerous.
Are they a little? I mean, I guess moose is the extreme example of aggressiveness, but can they tend to be aggressive, or when would they? How should you treat one if you encounter one?
Well, with most wild animals, the best thing to do is back away slowly.
Okay.
Just back away slowly, and don't try to get close.
Yeah, and take pictures. And
but they have some really magnificent wicked horns, those oryx.
And I've seen that. That's obviously one of the things that really stands out on them. Do they use them to fight for mating rights, or are they used to kind of fight off other animals, or what are they?
Probably all of the above.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you'd mentioned they were brought in for hunting.
Right.
So I guess, are they still hunted now? Or are they trying to get rid of them? Or is it just kind of left alone? Or where do they kind of stand on it?
It would be in New Mexico, and I don't really know that much about their game programs. Yeah. But I know that they compete with our native pronghorn antelope.
Okay.
And so I don't think they want a lot of them around. They may have a small hunting season. I don't know.
Now, let me ask you this. So some have made their way into Texas, but it's only been, I guess, El Paso County. Is that probably right? As far as we know.
As far as I know, okay. Another one got killed, a road kill. It was out by railroad.
Okay, yeah, northeast.
Yeah, okay. So they're dispersing.
Yeah,
they're moving around. Yeah.
I talked to someone, I remember at the Weather Service, like, what do you call this part of El Paso County between the Franklins and the Wacos? Technically, it's not the Tularosa Basin because the basin drains in. It's like, so it's, I hear it oftentimes referred to when it comes to geology or meteorology or whatever, that like almost like the southern extension of the Tularosa Basin, because animals can kind of flow freely, weather can kind of flow freely. So it's kind of a unique spot. So I could see that being a northeast kind of a thing where that happens.
And there's McGregor Range, which is gigantic.
Yeah, that's right.
The White Sands Missile Range, and
huge.
All of this habitat that they can traverse.
That is super interesting. And I want to move now to some of the, because we had talked about this last time, but it was super interesting. Some of the parrot species.
Right.
And I think we had mentioned some of them have been found in Las Cruces or Mesilla or through the valley.
Well, I know about the ones in the lower valley of El Paso.
It was the lower valley of El Paso.
I'm not sure about what's going on in New Mexico.
Okay. So lower valley of El Paso, because I remember the only native parrot species, we have to get over to Arizona. Is that correct?
Right, and I'm not even sure it exists anymore. It might be extirpated. That's a thick-billed parrot that was native to that area in southern Arizona. Yeah. But it's in either extinct or extirpated or very close. It's very threatened if it's still there.
Too bad. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the one that I had heard of, and I was actually surprised to see that it could come up into Arizona. So excluding that, that'd be the closest native. So again, these are non-native. So what's the species in the lower valley that we're looking at?
Well, we have the red-crowned parrot and the lilac-crowned parrot. And now we have another introduced species that's infiltrating El Paso, the flocks of the monk parakeet.
The monk parakeet.
Monk parakeet. Okay. They make gigantic, massive nests that hang from telephone poles or electric lines, which can cause some real serious problems.
And because I've seen two parrots when I growing up in the LA area. I saw two. They came in, landed at the top of our cypress tree and were like ripping branches off, and then they took off, making all kinds of noise, crackling and all this racket.
They're very vocal.
Very vocal. But that was the only time I've ever seen outside of a cage,
Right.
So where are these reports coming from the monk parakeet, for example, or monk parakeet for El Paso?
Well, the most common place to find them is at Rio Bosque Wetlands Park, which is borders Socorro and the border fence.
That's right.
In far southeast El Paso.
Okay.
And there's pretty big flocks there, but they've been reported elsewhere.
And is anything, because this is one thing, when you talk about non-native, do they want to kind of manage these? Are they just kind of keeping an eye on them for now? Or are they already worried that there's too many?
I don't think anybody's worried
They're not
about
worried?
them
Okay.
at this point.
Okay.
They don't compete with other birds, and they have unique nesting habits, so
Okay.
they don't usurp nest sites from native birds or
right.
anything. But like I said, they can be really dangerous. With power outages, and on
Nest
their
gets too heavy.
yeah. And so right now, it's not a real problem.
Okay. Okay, that's good. And the other two species that you'd mentioned, the red-crowned?
Red-crowned and the lilac-crowned, and they are native in Mexico, down in Tamaulipas,
Tamaulipas?
close to Brownsville.
And okay, so that's not far then. I mean, it's not close, but it's not that far removed from their native range in some ways.
Well, it's quite a ways away. I mean,
Yes.
the part of Mexico we're adjacent to, they're not there.
It's high. Okay. It's
So
more
we
highlands.
think that our parrots here are escaped pets that found each other and survived and are mating and reproducing. There's not a lot.
Right.
But they're definitely, like you said, you know how noisy parrots are.
Yeah.
Very, very noisy.
Yeah.
So you can go down there and you'll hear them.
See, and what's interesting, I know Tamaulipas can get cold every now and then. So I wonder if that's what makes them able to survive our winters. Deep South Texas every now and then can get whacked pretty good.
Yeah.
With a freeze, so maybe that gives them some cold tolerance.
Right.
I don't know how they would handle one of our deep freezes. That might be a different story.
Yeah, I always wonder about that too.
Yeah.
In the Brownsville area in South Texas, all across the lower Rio Grande down there, there's a lot of palm trees.
There are,
and they nest in holes. They're cavity nesters.
Oh, like in the trunk.
And they use those palm trees.
So where are they nesting here? Or is it not, are there not enough of them to really gauge where they are? Do we actually know where they're going and nesting here?
No.
Okay.
No, it's a mystery to me.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, maybe they'll grow in population and we'll see what happens. So if you had to pick some of the plant and animal species that are most problematic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know so far, like for example, the parrot's not really competing with anything, and I think that's probably one of the biggest gauges, right?
Mm-hmm.
If something is going to be an issue, what would you say are some of the most problematic?
Well, I think the aoudad are the most problematic mammal that we have, especially a large mammal. If you go to Waco Tanks State Park, you will see gigantic herds of these animals. And when they reproduce, instead of having one lamb like the native sheep do, the native wild sheep, they'll have 2 or 3.
Uh-huh.
And they can even mate more than once a year. So they're like taking over Waco Tanks and they're hammering the habitat.
Oh, yeah.
And we have bighorn sheep management areas all through West Texas.
Okay.
And so the aoudad are really impacting the bighorn sheep because they carry some diseases that they're immune to, but it wipes out the bighorn. So I think they're a really big problem as far as mammal goes. I mean, of course, you have your non-native rat species that nobody likes.
Oh, wow, I didn't know about that.
You know.
No, nobody likes that. That's not good.
Or the house mouse, which nobody likes, which is not native. So we have hundreds and hundreds of native mice, but they're native.
Right.
They don't harm anything.
Right. The desert has a lot of mice.
Yeah.
We see them run across the road every now and then at night.
Yeah, and we have not too far away from us. We don't have them here that I know of. Our nutria.
Oh, yeah.
It's a South American water mammal that's kind of like our muskrat.
Species. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're very problematic.
And where have those been spotted on the
I think
Texas
we
side?
had one once
Just one.
at Rio Bosque Wetlands.
Okay.
But I know they're a problem elsewhere.
So this is kind of, I had heard this story, and it's so funny that you mentioned. It just made me remember. Is this true that there were alligators spotted somewhere along the Rio Grande around, was Hudspeth County or something? It was really random.
Right, and again, we think that was somebody's pet that got too big
Okay.
because that's what's destroying the Everglades. People are dumping the animals that they don't want,
Yep,
like
their
their pythons and their alligators. And
Yeah.
so we think it was, somebody dumped that alligator.
Okay.
The alligators that have been spotted. Perhaps many moons ago,
Right.
we had them when we had a real river with real riparian habitat.
Right.
But
With
it's
all the
been
dams and
wiped out by the damming and channelization. And so anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. I had heard that and I thought, but I remember thinking back, well, they can handle a little cold as well. So, every now and then you see the Arctic blast come down and I remember this story they'd done in North Carolina where the swamp had frozen over and they busted their nostrils through the ice so they could just breathe a little. So it looked really interesting, kind of bizarre seeing the alligator sticking his nose through some ice. But
well, they're cold-blooded, and their temperature fluctuates with the environmental temperature.
Okay.
They don't have our internal thermostat that we do.
That's right. Yeah.
So
lay in the sun to warm up.
Right, they have to lay in the sun to warm up.
Now, shifting from animals, and thank you for kind of verifying that alligator story. I was like, I'd heard about that. What plants are most problematic, would you say?
Well, I'm really concerned about the Lehmann's lovegrass, which is a bunch grass that was introduced in southeastern Arizona for cattle forage from Africa. And it has spread all the way from southeastern Arizona all the way across New Mexico into Texas.
Really?
And I don't know if you've ever visited what used to be called the Wilderness Museum, but it's now the Archaeology Museum.
In Northeast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right.
We had, many, many species of native bunch grasses, which are super important because they hold the soil together and prevent erosion. They're all gone. You're lucky to find one or two. It's all Lehmann's lovegrass as far as the eye could see. And it's at Franklin Mountain State Park, too.
Oh, wow.
So it's just a shame because we have a lot of butterflies that lay their eggs on native grasses, and grasses hold our soil together. And they're just really important.
We need that in the spring.
Yes.
And other times.
So that I think that's a real problem. And, of course, the other big one would be the salt cedar. Because it spreads like crazy. It propagates itself in 2 or 3 different ways.
You can do cuttings even, can't you?
You can do cuttings. They propagate by seed. They propagate by wind.
And why they're a problem through the Southwest, right? Through the desert Southwest.
Right.
Why were they brought in? I can't remember.
Because they're really pretty, for one thing.
Yeah.
They're from Eurasia, and some people introduce them as fence breaks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, windbreaks.
Yeah.
Windbreaks, thank you. And others just were enchanted with those beautiful pinkish purple flowers, and they had no idea how it wrecked the habitat by exuding salt all over the soil and creating monocultures and drinking water,
tons of
like massive amounts of water.
Yep.
So those are the 2 main reasons that they were introduced here.
And I'm glad you actually brought up salt cedar because I know even all the way into the deserts of California, it's an issue. So basically Eastern California all the way into Texas. I thought I remembered, and this is years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong. Weren't there some removal projects going on that they thought they might be able to beat it back? But it doesn't seem like I don't want to say they've given up, but I don't hear about any of these projects anymore to try to reduce the population. I don't know if maybe they gave it a shot and they were like, we can't get rid of them faster than they can grow. That happens sometimes,
It does. We've had really good luck at Rio Bosque Wetlands Park. You have to, there's several different ways. You can cut it all the way down to the ground and then treat it with special stump herbicide.
Okay.
And it'll still probably resprout, so you have to get on it all the time. But a beetle was introduced called the salt cedar beetle, which is native to the area that salt cedar is, which keeps it under control. which is why we have so much problems with exotics. They didn't co-evolve.
Right.
So they didn't,
free-ranging.
yeah, they did, yeah. So that beetle was introduced, big research project along the Pecos River.
Okay, yeah, east of here.
And, I was very reluctant because usually when you switch to biocontrol, it ends up being a disaster. But
Another thing comes with the beetle.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But apparently it's been pretty successful,
Okay, good.
on the Pecos. So I don't know if we're using it here yet.
Right.
But
Wait and see how
that
it
beetle's been the best bet so far.
Good. So what are some non-natives? We don't have a lot of time left, and this is kind of an interesting thing too, but we talked about the ones that are not doing really any harm, the ones that are doing some harm. Are there any non-natives that are, besides the salt cedar beetle, that have brought some positives that we weren't really expecting?
Well, there are some plants that provide food for the birds,
Okay.
even though they're not native, and some of them may even be invasive. But if a plant has a berry or a lot of nectar production, then it's going to feed the hummingbirds, it's going to feed the songbirds. So, for instance, bird of paradise, that's actually not native.
Right.
It's naturalized from South America.
Oh.
But a lot of birds, forage on that plant.
Birds and bees.
Right.
Like you can't get near it when they're beautiful. But at an old house, there were 3 in the backyard. And I mean, you really wanted to wait till the sun went down and the bees and wasps and bumblebees and everything kind of went home. Because I mean, those they do attract a lot, but that's interesting, and hummingbirds as well.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, and like there's some honeysuckle that people grow around town. There is a native honeysuckle, but it's very hard to find in a nursery. So people are planting this non-native honeysuckle again, fabulous for the hummingbirds.
The red orange flowers,
yes,
that kind of vines out.
Yeah, and there's many other examples of all kinds that benefit the wildlife. Even lantana.
Oh yeah, lantana. Yeah.
The lantana that they sell in the nurseries here usually are not our native lantana. They're from other parts of Texas.
Okay, I didn't know we had a native lantana.
We do have, yeah.
Wow. What color flower does it?
Purple. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I've seen that.
There's a purple one and a light purple one.
It's like the clusters are about that big. Yes, it's beautiful. I didn't realize it was native.
Yeah.
Okay.
And butterflies. Love that. Butterflies are really, really important. So,
are there any animals so the plants, I guess, if they can handle our desert climate, plus in a way, as long as they're not doing anything.
As long as they don't get too invasive.
Yeah, like drinking
and
gallons of water.
Outcompete all the native plants. We don't want that.
And are there any animals that we've seen that turned out to be beneficial or are beneficial to a point that we know?
Well,
that was a little trickier.
I keep thinking about the ones that are not beneficial, especially insects. We haven't talked about insects.
Oh yeah, that's right.
We haven't talked about killer bees or killer hornets or fire ants.
Killer bees arrived late 90s?
I think, yeah.
And then fire ants, I don't know when they arrived, but I haven't seen. No, I've seen fire ants here. I've seen fire ants.
Well, we have native fire ants.
Oh, I didn't. Okay.
Yeah, and they won't. They don't harm you.
Okay.
It's the ones from Argentina, South American ones,
yep.
And they're not really bad here yet.
Are they starting to be found more? Or?
I think they are, and there's also all these other things like crazy ants and raspberry ants that are spreading like crazy. Like most of them are like in the Houston area, but they spread.
Yeah, they do. I remember much of the rest of Texas deals with fire ants every year.
Right.
I mean,
they're nasty.
They are. When I lived in North Texas, I mean, we had some stuff in the, that you could just take out I forget what it was called, and you just dump it right on when you see a mound pop up. I mean, it's like they're not going anywhere as far as I can tell. I think we're stuck with them for a long time. So fire ants would probably be one of the worst, but we haven't seen a lot of those. Right.
Not the non-native ones.
And you mentioned raspberry ant?
Yeah, they have these ants in the Houston area called crazy ants and then raspberry ants.
And how common or not common are those?
They're very common there. They're causing major problems.
Oh, wow.
So it's just something to be on the lookout for. And then, of course, there's all those Asian longhorns, and there's a whole slew of beetles that, destroy trees.
Oh, okay.
So the insects, as beneficial as they are, which is, we can't live without them. Right. The world wouldn't be the same.
For sure.
But there's a lot of them that are really nasty.
Yeah. No, yeah, there are. Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of any other mammal species that actually are not native and beneficial, and I'm falling short.
Yeah. Yeah, as the joke earlier, I was thinking maybe the list for the not beneficial is quite a bit longer than the beneficial. Well, thank you very much for coming back on and talking about some of the non-native just species in general, from birds to plants, as well as some of the animal, the sheep. That was very, very interesting. Or the Waco tanks, was not aware of that. Thank you again for coming on. Where can people go to find more information on just kind of what we have that's local to the area?
The internet is your best. There are so many sites with Texas A&M, Texas Parks and Wildlife, University of Texas, UTEP, all have wonderful pages. You can just Google invasive species, West Texas. And we have an entomologist that is at the AgriLife Research Center.
Okay.
And some plant people that mainly work with agriculture, but they would know about some more insects. And we have a mammologist at UTEP and a herpetologist. And, I forgot to mention the Mediterranean gecko.
Oh, okay. See, there's another one for you.
Yeah,
look out for.
But there's a lot.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there's a lot of good information out there.
Okay, yeah, sounds like it. So if you come across something you don't know, you can always try Googling native and non-native and Texas wildlife.
Or invasive.
Or invasive. That's right.
Or non-native invasive.
Well, thank you very much, Lois Balin, Texas Parks and Wildlife, and we look back forward to having you again.
Okay, thank you.
If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to comment, subscribe, and share it with your friends. You can check out our past archive of episodes on kfoxtv.com or listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for breaking it down with me, and we'll see you next time here on The Breakdown.